Single mom loses job interview helping fainting man, but he was a billionaire and did something that shocked everyone. Please rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. I count on your help. The sun hadn't fully risen when the young single mother hurried through the streets of downtown Manhattan, tightly holding her 4-year-old daughter's hand. The little girl, slight and pale, looked barely 2 due to her extreme fragility, a result of a meager diet and the hardships they faced daily. The woman's best and only suit had been discreetly mended at the seams during the night in a desperate attempt to look presentable for the interview that could change their lives forever. Working as a cleaning lady at 3 different jobs from dawn until late at night, she barely managed to pay the rent for their small room in Queens. Every penny was counted, every meal planned with mathematical precision. The opportunity to work at a respected company in Midtown, with a salary almost triple what she earned cleaning offices and houses, was like a miracle she couldn't afford to waste. Her hurried steps echoed on the pavement as she checked the watch on her wrist, a gift from her mother who had passed away years ago. She had only 15 minutes left before the scheduled time, and she still needed to find a nearby daycare to drop off the girl, who looked around with those big, curious eyes, unaware of the tension gripping her mother. That's when she spotted a man lying on the sidewalk, apparently unconscious. He wore a suit that cost more than her annual rent, shiny Italian leather shoes, and a gold watch that gleamed in the morning light. He looked like a movie star, with striking features and perfectly groomed hair, even in unconsciousness. Passers-by hurried past, some completely avoiding the inert body, others casting quick glances before continuing their journeys. The young woman's heart sank. She looked at her watch again, feeling the weight of the decision she had to make. The interview was in 10 minutes on the other side of Union Square Park. She could simply keep walking as everyone else did. No one would judge her for it. But something deep within her, a genuine kindness that even the hardships of life hadn't managed to extinguish, spoke louder. She knelt beside the stranger, asking her daughter to stay close, and began to check if he was breathing. Her hands, calloused from hard work, delicately touched his wrist, searching for vital signs. The man was alive, but appeared extremely exhausted. She asked passers-by for help, but most simply ignored her, as if she were invisible. Using the water bottle she carried for her daughter, she moistened a tissue and placed it on the stranger's forehead, whispering words of encouragement. The girl watched everything attentively, holding tight to her mother's skirt. Precious minutes passed until he began to slowly open his eyes. The first thing he saw was the worried face of that woman, whose eyes radiated a compassion he had never found in his world of appearances and self-interest. Even in her simple clothes and signs of a hard life, there was a dignity in her that instantly impressed him. The little girl beside her smiled shyly when he looked at her, and something in his chest stirred in a way he couldn't explain. When he managed to sit up, supported by the kindness of that stranger, he noticed that she was constantly looking at the watch on her wrist, with an expression of growing anxiety. He asked if she was late for something important, and she briefly explained about the job interview, without mentioning how much that opportunity meant to her and her daughter. The man, who had fainted due to extreme stress and long hours without adequate rest while managing his business empire, felt a wave of guilt when he realized that she had lost precious time to help him. He offered to accompany her to the interview location, but she politely refused, saying it was too late. The sad smile with which she said goodbye was etched in his memory like an indelible mark. He watched her walk away, holding the girl's hand, and something inside him transformed at that moment. For years, he had built his fortune and business empire driven by ambition and the need to never feel vulnerable again, as he had in his youth. He had invested in the stock market with surgical precision, accumulated assets in various currencies, including dollars and euros, diversified his assets between real estate and high-yield investments. His net worth placed him among the wealthiest businessmen in the city, but that day, watching that woman's figure disappear between the buildings, he realized that all his wealth was worth nothing compared to the selfless gesture he had just witnessed. She had sacrificed her own opportunity to help a complete stranger, expecting nothing in return. It was a type of nobility that his money could never buy. In the following days, the image of that woman and the fragile girl constantly haunted him. He had his assistants discreetly investigate who she was, discovering that she worked as a cleaning lady at 3 different jobs to support her daughter alone. The information left him even more disturbed, knowing that his gratitude had cost her a real chance at a life change. 2 weeks passed since the encounter on the sidewalk, and the millionaire couldn't get that woman out of his thoughts. He had instructed his assistants to locate her, but had asked for absolute discretion. He didn't want to scare her or make her feel stalked. When he finally obtained the information he was looking for, his heart ached to discover the brutal reality of her life. She lived in a low-income neighborhood in the Bronx, in a small and simple house that she shared with 2 other families. She worked cleaning offices from 5 in the morning to 8, then ran to a middle-class residence where she cleaned until 2 in the afternoon and ended the day cleaning a small grocery store until 10 at night. The girl stayed in a community daycare during the day, funded by the few dollars she managed to separate from her minimum income. What impressed him most were the neighbors' accounts of her character. Even living with so much difficulty, she always found a way to help those who needed it even more. She took care of a sick neighbor's daughter, brought food to an elderly man who lived alone, and never failed to smile and greet everyone with genuine kindness. She was respected and loved by the entire community, who saw her as an example of strength and goodness. Determined to reciprocate the gesture that had changed his perspective on life, he began to plan a way to help her without hurting her pride. He knew from the neighbors' comments that she was a woman of rigid principles who would never accept charity. He needed a delicate approach. On Monday morning, he showed up at the small grocery store where she worked at night. He wore simple clothes, trying not to attract attention, but his presence still caused a striking contrast in the humble environment. When she saw him, her eyes widened in surprise and concern. He asked how she was doing, if she had found another job after missing the interview. She answered politely, but keeping her distance, clearly uncomfortable with his presence there. When he offered her a position in one of his companies, with a fair salary and benefits, she interrupted him abruptly. The reaction was explosive. With her eyes shining with indignation, she made it clear that she didn't need anyone's pity. She had spent her entire life fighting with her own strength and wasn't going to start accepting handouts now. Her words were harsh, but filled with a dignity he couldn't help but admire. She said she didn't want to see him again and asked him not to show up at her workplace anymore, but the millionaire didn't give up easily. During the following weeks, he began to frequent the neighborhood where she lived, always discreetly. He bought groceries at the local grocery store, talked to the residents, learned about their stories and difficulties. Gradually, he began to understand how that community worked, based on mutual solidarity and support between neighbors. At first, the residents were suspicious of him. A man clearly from a higher social class, even wearing simple clothes, did not go unnoticed. But his genuine concern for local problems and his willingness to listen to each person's stories won the community's trust. It was during one of these visits that he witnessed a scene that profoundly marked him. The 4-year-old girl was playing in the street with other children when she tripped and hurt her knee. She was crying softly, trying to be brave, but it was visible that she was in pain. He approached to help, and she recognized him immediately. With the typical innocence of her age, she asked if he was the man her mother had saved on the street. When he confirmed, she smiled through her tears and said that her mother always talked about the importance of helping those in need, even when it costs a lot. The child's simple words echoed in his heart as a deep echo of truths he had forgotten. When the mother arrived from work and found the millionaire talking to her daughter, her expression became tense. She thanked him coldly for taking care of the injured girl, but made it clear that she didn't want his presence there. She asked him to stop appearing in the neighborhood, as it was causing comments and speculation that harmed her reputation. The tension between them was palpable, but there was something more. He noticed how she looked away when their eyes met, how her hands trembled slightly when he approached. The attraction was mutual, but she fought against these feelings with all her might, knowing that they belonged to completely different worlds. That night, he stayed awake, thinking about her words. Why would his presence cause problems for her reputation? The answer came through conversations with some residents who had become closer. In the community, there were already rumors about the relationship between them. Some speculated that she had become the mistress of a rich man. Others, that she was receiving money in exchange for favors. The discovery infuriated him. How could people be so cruel to someone who only showed kindness? He wanted to confront each person who spread these rumors, use his power and influence to silence them, but he knew that this would only make the situation worse. Any drastic action on his part would confirm the suspicions and further harm her reputation. That's when he made a bold decision. If he couldn't help her directly, he would help the entire community anonymously. He began to make discreet donations to the daycare where the girl studied, financed the renovation of the local health center, and created job opportunities through contracts with small businesses in the neighborhood. But she was too smart not to realize what was happening. When the improvements began to appear very conveniently, she immediately became suspicious. Her suspicions were confirmed when she learned that a company linked to his business group had hired several people from the community for small services. The confrontation was inevitable. She looked for him on a Friday afternoon, with her eyes full of tears of anger and frustration. She accused him of playing with people's lives, of using his money to manipulate the situation and force her to feel indebted to him. She said that his help was destroying everything she had fought for her entire life, her independence and her dignity. Her words hit him like physical blows, but he didn't back down. For the first time, he let his own vulnerability appear. He told her about his difficult childhood, about how he had lost his parents young and built his empire driven by the fear of becoming vulnerable again. He explained that finding someone capable of sacrificing their own opportunity to help a stranger had awakened in him a humanity he thought he had lost forever. The revelation about his difficult childhood created a crack in the armor of resistance she had built around her heart. Seeing that powerful man, owner of a fortune that included investments in stocks and millionaire applications, showing his humanity so rawly, left her deeply disturbed. But she couldn't allow herself to soften. Her life had been a sequence of disappointments, with people who promised help and then charged prices she couldn't pay. 2 weeks after the confrontation, life seemed to have returned to normal. He had stopped appearing in the neighborhood. The mysterious donations ceased, and she returned to her routine of 3 jobs. But there was something different in the air, a tension she couldn't define. The residents of the community seemed to avoid her, whispering when she passed, and some of the mothers at the daycare no longer greeted her with the same cordiality as before. The explanation for the change in behavior came brutally on a Tuesday morning. She arrived at the office where she had worked as a cleaning lady since 5 in the morning and was greeted by the supervisor with a cold expression. Without beating around the bush, he informed her that her services were no longer needed. When she asked why, the answer was like a slap in the face. The company had learned that she maintained inappropriate relationships that could harm the reputation of the place. The shock was so great that she could barely articulate words. She asked for explanations, denied any inappropriate behavior, but the supervisor had already made his decision. He mentioned rumors about her connection with a rich man, insinuated that she received payments for special favors, and made it clear that a woman with that type of reputation had no place in a reputable company. With wobbly legs and a broken heart, she left the building carrying her few belongings in a plastic bag. On the sidewalk, she had to lean against a wall to avoid fainting. One of the 3 jobs that supported her life and her daughters had ended because of lies and malicious speculation. But the nightmare was just beginning. On the same day, the owner of the house where she cleaned in the afternoon dismissed her with a lame excuse about cost reduction. And when she arrived at the grocery store to work at night, the owner called her for a private conversation. With a disgusting smile, he made indecent proposals, suggesting that if the rumors about her were true, perhaps they could reach a different agreement about her job. The humiliation was total. She ran out of the grocery store with the man's dirty words echoing in her ears. In a matter of hours, she had lost all her jobs and her reputation was destroyed. She arrived home and found her daughter playing in the backyard, oblivious to the drama unfolding in her mother's life. How would she explain to that innocent child that they might not even have money to eat in the following week? That night, after putting the girl to sleep, she allowed herself to cry for the first time in years. They weren't silent tears of frustration, but deep sobs of despair that seemed to tear her soul apart. Everything she had built with so much effort, all the dignity she had preserved, even in the worst difficulties, had been destroyed by rumors based on a gesture of kindness. While she suffered in silence, the millionaire was in his luxurious apartment, completely unaware of the storm that his attempts to help had unleashed. He had spent the last few weeks trying to respect her, keeping his distance as she had asked. He had focused his efforts on expanding his businesses, diversifying his investments in international funds, and increasing his income through applications in different currencies. It was only when one of the residents of the community, who had become his friend during his visits to the neighborhood, looked for him urgently, that he learned what had happened. The man, a 60-year-old gentleman who worked as a doorman, was visibly disturbed when telling how she had lost all her jobs in a matter of days. The rage that took over the millionaire was instantaneous and devastating. He wanted to use all his economic power to destroy each person who had spread the rumors. He wanted to buy the companies that fired her and fire everyone involved. He wanted to make each one pay dearly for the injustice committed. But his rage was replaced by a deep guilt when he realized that he was truly responsible for that entire situation. His attempts to help, however well-intentioned, had become a curse in her life. His presence in the neighborhood, his gestures of generosity, everything had been interpreted in the worst possible way in a society that judged poor women much more severely than rich men. Determined to fix the damage he had caused, he went to her house the following dawn. He found her awake on the small porch, looking into the emptiness with a lost expression. When she saw him, she showed no surprise, only a deep sadness that broke his heart. He tried to speak, apologize, explain that he had never imagined that his actions could harm her in that way. But she interrupted him with a calm and cold voice that he had never heard before. She said that she finally understood the difference between their worlds. For him, money was a tool that solved problems. For her, it was a destructive force that had just ruined her life. The confrontation that followed was charged with an overwhelming emotional intensity. She accused him of having played with her life as if it were an expensive toy, of having completely ignored the consequences of his actions in a community where reputation was all that people like her possessed. She said that he would never understand what it meant to work hard just to survive, because he had always had the privilege of turning money into solutions. He tried to argue, explain his intentions, but each word he said seemed to increase her fury. For the first time, she let the anger take over completely, shouting that she didn't want to see him anymore, that his presence in her life had been a curse since the first day. The sexual tension that had always existed between them exploded at that moment of extreme confrontation. When he approached to try to touch her, to make her understand that he never wanted to hurt her, she pushed him forcefully. But instead of moving away, he held her wrists, and for a moment they were face to face, panting breaths, eyes full of pain, anger, and a desire that neither of them wanted to admit. It was she who broke the moment, moving away abruptly and asking him to leave. But before he could respond, the girl's voice echoed from the door, asking if everything was okay. The child had woken up with the screams and was in the doorway, scared and confused. Seeing his daughter witnessing that scene was the last straw for her. With tears in her eyes, she told the millionaire that he had managed to destroy even the child's peace. She asked him to disappear from their lives forever and went inside, slamming the door shut. Outside, he stood for long minutes, listening to the muffled sobs coming from inside the house. For the first time in his adult life, all his money, all his power, all his assets and investments were worthless. He had deeply hurt the only person who truly mattered and had no idea how to fix the damage he had caused. 3 months passed since that devastating night. The young mother had managed to find some sporadic cleaning jobs, doing house cleaning by the day, but nothing steady. The money barely covered basic necessities, and she had needed to sell the few valuables she possessed to pay the rent. The girl, always observant for her age, had noticed that something was wrong, but never asked directly about the difficulties. One Thursday morning brought the nightmare she feared most. Her daughter woke up with a high fever and difficulty breathing. At the local clinic, the diagnosis was frightening: severe pneumonia requiring immediate hospitalization. The doctor explained that malnutrition had weakened the child's immune system, making the infection more dangerous. At the public hospital, she faced a cruel reality. The pediatric beds were full, and her daughter would need to wait in a line that could take days. Each hour of waiting meant a risk of complications that could be irreversible. The nurse, feeling sorry for the situation, discreetly suggested that she seek a private hospital, but the cost of treatment was equivalent to several months of work. It was in this moment of total despair that fate intervened again. One of the mothers waiting in line mentioned having seen on TV a report about a businessman who had created a medical assistance program for underprivileged children. She hadn't paid attention to the name, but something in the account made her look for more information. When she discovered that the program had been created by his company, her first impulse was to refuse. But looking at her daughter, who was getting worse with each passing hour, she swallowed her pride and made the most difficult phone call of her life. His voice on the other end of the line showed surprise and a genuine concern that completely disarmed her. In less than an hour, a private ambulance was transporting the girl to the best pediatric hospital in the city. He had moved mountains to ensure that she received the most advanced treatment available, with a team of specialists who worked tirelessly to stabilize her condition. During the first critical 48 hours, he remained at the hospital, organizing all the details of the treatment and ensuring that she didn't need to worry about anything other than her daughter's recovery. But he maintained a respectful distance, understanding that his presence was still a source of pain for her. It was during one early morning, when she was dozing in the chair next to her daughter's bed, that he finally approached. He brought hot coffee and a blanket, simple gestures that demonstrated a care she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time since the confrontation, they spoke without hostility. He told her about the terrible months he had spent, tormented by the guilt of what his actions had caused in her life. He revealed that he had created the medical assistance program specifically thinking about cases like her daughter's, in a desperate attempt to do something positive with his fortune. He explained that he had further diversified his investments, including holdings in bitcoins and fixed income funds, specifically to finance social projects. She listened to him in silence, seeing for the first time the man behind the millionaire's facade. She realized that he had lost weight, that there was a deep sadness in his eyes that didn't exist before. When he apologized once again, explaining that he had never imagined that trying to help her would result in so much suffering, something within her began to transform. The girl's recovery was slow but steady. During the 2 weeks of hospitalization, they developed a routine. He appeared during visiting hours, always bringing small gifts for the child and snacks for her. They talked about trivial matters, carefully avoiding topics that could reignite old conflicts. The girl, with the typical innocence of her age, began to call the millionaire her special protector. She got excited when he arrived, showed him the drawings she made during the day, and even asked him to read stories at bedtime. Seeing that powerful man demonstrating such tenderness with her daughter touched the mother's heart in a way she couldn't deny. One night, when the child was already sleeping, he made a confession that changed everything. He said that he had discreetly investigated the companies that had fired her and discovered something shocking. The supervisor of the office where she worked had spread the malicious rumors because she had rejected his inappropriate advances weeks before meeting him. The man had used the situation as an excuse to take revenge for the rejection. The revelation left her in shock. All the humiliation, the loss of jobs, the destruction of her reputation had not been a consequence of his attempts to help her, but of the malice of a man who hadn't accepted a no for an answer. The guilt she had placed on him turned into a complex mixture of relief and sadness, but there was more. He revealed that he had discreetly bought the cleaning company where she worked and fired the supervisor responsible for the rumors. Not as revenge, he explained quickly, but because he had discovered that the man had harassed other female employees over the years. He was offering her not only her job back, but the position of general supervisor, recognizing the intelligence and leadership ability he had observed in her. The proposal left her speechless. It wasn't disguised charity, but a genuine recognition of her qualities. He explained that he had noticed, during his visits to the neighborhood, how she was respected and sought after by the neighbors to resolve conflicts and organize community initiatives. She was a natural leader who deserved an opportunity to grow professionally. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. With a vulnerability she had never seen in him, he confessed that during those months apart he had discovered something fundamental. All his assets, all his profits and dividends meant nothing without someone special to share them with. That she had completely transformed his worldview and shown him that true value wasn't in his bank account, but in the ability to make a difference in people's lives. When he asked not only that she accept the job, but also that she consider building a future together, she felt all the barriers she had erected around her heart begin to crumble. For the first time, she saw in him not the unattainable millionaire, but the man who had learned to value what really mattered in life. Her answer came through her daughter. The girl, who was pretending to sleep but heard everything, opened her eyes and asked when the three of them were going to live together as a real family. The child's innocence broke the last resistances of both, and they finally allowed themselves to admit the love they had denied for so long. The kiss that sealed that moment was loaded with months of suffering, tension, and repressed desire. But it also carried the promise of a future where social differences would not be barriers, but complements that would make them stronger together. 6 months later, they were married in a simple ceremony in the community where she had grown up. He had learned that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars or euros, but in the ability to love and be loved unconditionally. She had discovered that accepting help from those who truly care isn't weakness, but courage. Together, they transformed the cleaning company into a cooperative that offered dignified work and fair benefits for hundreds of families. Their investments were now directed not only to increase wealth, but to create real opportunities for growth for people who, like her, only needed a chance to show their value. The girl, now healthy and strong, grew up in a home full of love and possibilities. And when people asked the couple what had been the secret to overcoming so many obstacles, they always answered in the same way: true love knows no social barriers, only hearts willing to fight for it. If you like this wonderful story, please comment, giving a score from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and if you love beautiful stories, subscribe to my channel. I promise to make your day better with my videos.